Hi, greetings everyone. This is Mathew Cherian. This is Mathew Cherian in the United States, and I will be co-moderating this with Mr. Kaushik Desai in Mumbai, in India. Today's topic is patient voice in generic medicine development. Let's go to the next slide. Next one, please. Yeah. Okay. This webinar is being recorded and live streamed on YouTube. This recording will be available on our website for the next year. You may ask questions using the question box that you have at the bottom of your screen. You are welcome to provide feedback by going to that link that you see, webinars@fip.org. We invite you to become a member of FIP, which is the worldwide international apex body for all national pharmaceutical societies. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so today's topic is patient voice in generic drug development. And the panelist is Dr. Sarah Ibrahim. She's Associate Director for Generic Drug Global Affairs with Office of Generic Drugs of the US FDA. She develops Office of Generic Drug strategies to address emerging regulatory challenges in international generic industry. Dr. Ibrahim has a PhD in pharmaceutical science from the University of Cincinnati and a BS in pharmacy from Cairo University. So it's over to you, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Mathew, for the wonderful introduction. And as you mentioned, I am Sarah Ibrahim, the Associate Director of Global Generic Drug Affairs in the Office of Generic Drugs, Center of Drug Evaluation and Research at the United States Food and Drug Administration. And the topic today is the patient voice in generic drug development. And as always, we start with a disclaimer that this presentation reflects the views of the author and the presenter and should not be construed to represent FDA's views or policies. Right. So for a while now, the healthcare system has recognized that there is a benefit to a more patient-centric approach, that when we increase engagement from patients, providers, and families, this leads to a better understanding and knowledge among patients as well as healthcare providers, ensuring that proper healthcare choices are made, leading to an overall improved disease control. Now, we understand that it is critical to engage with patients in the decision-making process, empowering them to take better control of their disease condition and attain that better quality of life. The Food and Drug Administration is responsible for protecting the public health by ensuring safety, efficacy, and security of human and veterinary drugs, biological products, and medical devices, and also ensuring the safety of our nation's food supply, cosmetics, and products that do emit radiation. By default, and with honor, patients are the heart of FDA's work and mission. And we do believe that patients and their caregivers are the experts when it comes to their own health condition. Therefore, it's imperative for their voice to be integrated into all phases of medical product development, from preclinical studies to post-market safety surveillance. We value and we advocate for patient engagement as an essential component in the development of medical products. Now, the Office of Generic Drugs in particular ensures high quality, affordable generic drugs are available to the American public. And we follow a rigorous process that includes numerous steps very similar to the brand name drug, ensuring that both products are of equal quality and equal efficacy. Now, 90% of US prescriptions filled are generic drug products. And these particular prescriptions account for about 18% of the country's spending on prescription drugs. So let's talk a little bit about what patient engagement looks like across FDA. So patient engagement can be best described as a process of knowledge exchange needed to better integrate patient perspectives, needs, and priorities. There are numerous patient engagement initiatives within the agency. The patient affairs staff is the team in the Office of the Commissioner dedicated to providing a meaningful experience for patient communities to engage with the FDA. There are also the FDA Patient Representative Program, which is the agency's flagship program that offers patients and caregivers the opportunity to provide critical advice to the agency as it regulates medical products from drugs, biologics, as well as devices. Now, patient listening sessions can either be FDA requested, where FDA has a specific set of questions we want to ask the patient advocacy groups, or they are patient-led. So when patient community wants to share their perspectives to FDA. Now, patient listening sessions, they're small, they're informal, non-regulatory, and non-public teleconference meetings that allow participants from patient advocacy groups to engage and connect with FDA staff firsthand. It is an opportunity for patients to share their experience, perspectives, needs related to their health or disease, and not necessarily a specific medical product. It gives the FDA an opportunity to connect with underrepresented communities as well, and help FDA better understand what is most important to different communities and individuals who have specific health, medical, and treatment needs. Now, if you notice, there are a number of additional patient engagement opportunities across the centers. While I will not dwell into all of them, but let's focus a little bit on the highlights. So CBER interacts with patient groups in center-specific topics and truly actively engages in agency programs, initiatives, and events to gather patient input and share their best practices and involve patients in medical product development. CBER engages patient organizations on disease and therapy-specific issues. Now, the patient science and engagement initiatives at CDRH include Patient Engagement Advisory Committee, Patient Preference Information in Medical Device Decision-Making, Clinical Outcome Assessments in Medical Device Decision-Making, and CDRH Patient and Caregiver Connection. Now, a lot of these truly do overlap, and there are a number of similar programs within each center. Now, being from the Office of Generic Drugs, we will focus on CEDAR initiatives. So the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research performs an essential public health task by making sure that safe and effective drugs are available to improve the health of the people in the United States. Now, we've already described patient listening sessions as one of the methods for patients to engage with CEDAR. Additionally, there are the Patient Representative Program, which is the PRP. The Patient Representative Program is the agency's flagship program that offers patients and caregivers the opportunity to provide critical advice to the agency as it regulates these medical products. And the role of the FDA Patient Representative Group is unique, where patients and advocates are appointed as special government employees. They are temporary employees to provide direct input to agency staff as they share their valuable insight on their experience with various disease and disease conditions. The Patient Engagement Collaborative is a group of patient organizations and individual representatives who can discuss how to achieve more meaningful patient engagement in medical product development and other regulatory discussions at the FDA. The Patient Engagement Collaborative, or the PEC, provides diverse perspectives on topics such as systematic patient engagement, transparency, methods of communication, providing considerations for implementing new strategies so we can enhance patient engagement at the FDA, and propose possibly new models of collaboration in which patient and patient advocate perspectives are incorporated. approach to help ensure that patients' experiences, perspectives, needs, and priorities are captured in a meaningful manner and incorporated into drug development and evaluation. Now, the primary goal
Tara, apologies. I think you're facing internet problems. Can you please switch off your camera? Maybe we will hear you better.
Most important to patients related to their treatment benefits, risk, burden, both of the disease as well as the therapeutics available, and how to best communicate that information to support in better decision-making for patients. So let's shift gears a little bit.
Sarah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Earlier you had poor internet connection. To avoid this happening in the future, can you please switch off your camera as a backup plan?
Do you want me to switch it off now?
Yeah, because we couldn't hear you 2 times already.
Okay.
Thank you. I did it for you. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So switching gears a little bit, the FDA's Office of Generic Drugs within the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research ensures high quality, affordable generic drugs are available to the American public. And as I mentioned, 90% of US prescriptions filled are generic drugs. However, those drugs only account for around 18% of the country's spending. In other words, costly brand name products account for the bulk of pharmaceutical spending, and generics and biosimilar industry does help in bringing the cost down. Now, the yearly savings from generics and biosimilars exceeded $338 billion, an increase of more than $23 billion from 2019. And yearly savings consistently increased by around 7 to 10%. The US healthcare system has saved nearly $2.4 trillion in the last 10 years alone due to the availability of affordable generics. To give you a little perspective, patient centricity and focus is in the heart of OGD's mission. And incorporating that patient voice is truly not a nuance. OGD focuses on patient accessibility and affordability of quality generics, and that is inherently patient-focused approach. Now, as I mentioned, the cost savings. Now, generic drugs approved in 2018 yielded an annual savings of around $18 billion. $4 billion of those are attributed to first generic drug approvals. Savings from 2019 approvals amounted to around $25 billion, with around $9.4 billion coming from first generic drug approvals. Savings from 2020 approvals were estimated at around $11 billion, with first generic approvals contributing to almost $2 billion of that. So overall, in the past 3 years, first generic drug approvals accounted for 29% of total savings. Now, why is that important? Well, OGD prioritizes assessments of first generics, which is driven by patient needs. And then we continue prioritizing beyond the first generic to further drive the cost of medications down. Prioritizing assessments of key drug products, such as those in shortage, or supporting a public health emergency. And a great recent example is that OGD approved over 100 new generic drug applications and over 1,500 supplements for products used in the treatment of patients with COVID-19. Now, that was a direct response to a public health crisis, and therefore highlights and indicates OGD's patient-focused approach. Additionally, OGD funds significant research grants that investigate specific views and concerns from patient perspectives, and further identify allowable differences where patient preferences are the fundamental stone to setting research priorities. Now, patient engagement encompasses a wide range of patient engagement initiatives and practices, many of which are already ingrained in OGD culture. So let's talk a little bit about why OGD prioritizes first generics as a direct response to patient needs. So first generics, and particularly first generics of new molecular entity products, are often associated with significant price reduction when it's relative to the brand equivalent. Now, any subsequent approval after that results in lowering prices and ultimately generating substantial savings for patients over time. Now, first generics often yield, as I mentioned, substantial cost savings. And we had mentioned before the numbers where generic drugs approved in 2018, 4 billion were attributed to first generics, around 11 billion cost savings in 2019, and almost 2 billion in 2020. First generic approvals have an outsized contribution to total savings. During these 3 years that I mentioned, first generics represented about 12% of products with generic approvals, yet they contributed to around 20% of total savings. This distribution is even more pronounced for first generics of new molecular entities. And these represent about 5% of products with ANDA approvals, while contributing to around 20% of total savings. So we do continue to prioritize first generics, but in order to continue driving the cost down, we always put the patients as a center and as a focus, and therefore continue to prioritize past and further in order to bring that cost down. So OGD wants to ensure that patients are heard, particularly that patients' chief complaints sometimes may not be factored or incorporated into medical product development plans. And therefore, it is critical that their specific experiences that matter most to patients are incorporated. Patient perspectives on meaningful treatment benefits. OGD has a number of patient engagement opportunities to alleviate, engage, and empower patients. Now, we do encourage that patients or patient advocacy groups take the opportunity to provide comments in open dockets related to FDA guidance documents, including product-specific guidances, to influence the current thinking of the agency on matters of procedure, policy, as well as science. We also encourage patient participation in the pre-ANDA programs, as well as GDUFA science and research programs. GDUFA research programs, they support investigation of generic drug development challenges and help us as OGD establish and clarify the scientific framework for ANDA development submission as well as assessments. We do hold public meetings each year to help set these research priorities, and we constantly engage with stakeholders, including patient and patient advocacy groups, and invite them to the table to assist us in improving our research and scientific program. And of course, we encourage patient groups to request a meeting through our professional affairs and stakeholder program. Now, what is really unique in 2022 is that OGD held its very first patient listening session, and this was a patient-requested and a patient-led session. And this is an open invitation to patient advocates to utilize that particular channel in order to better engage with the Office of Generic Drugs. So let's talk a little bit about where are we supposed to integrate patient input. So patient contribution spans across all stages, and we do encourage integrating patient input into generic drug development and decision-making across the different stages. In the translational stage, for example, collecting patient experience with brand drugs can help developers in creating a more robust development pathway, ensuring product development success. Now, in the pre-market stage, in addition to human factor studies, determining the allowable differences that could impact patient perception or trust is critical. Determining allowable product difference that could affect a patient's ability to accurately use that drug product, or even be able to identify substitutability challenges beyond the scope of regulatory requirements. Now let's take it a little bit further. It can proactively identify potential safety issues or unexpected safety considerations. Now, of course, in the post-market stage, patients are integral for safeguarding the American public, and FDA is very active in this domain. Now, we encourage the public to share and report any safety information, as well as any drug shortage, to better help us secure our drug supply chain. So again, developers can understand how they can voluntarily use patient engagement to elicit experience, perspectives, and other relevant information, and be able to better improve the design for the generic drug development program. These predefined questions, targets, effective and efficient data collection will provide you with higher quality data that is results driven, saving you both cost and time. Now, patient preference information does capture that valuable patient perspective and aspect to ensure the success of your program. There are numerous examples where the generic drug development failed because they failed to ask the most significant stakeholder the right questions. Now, access and cost are a global pharmaceutical concern, and generics do lighten the burden on patients. So patient engagement can clarify how patients think about those trade-offs, that risk and benefit balance for a given technology, and how patient preferences on benefits and risk vary amongst the different groups that we interact with. And of course, their willingness to accept uncertainty within certain aspects, or accept certain difficulties or trade-offs in their treatment. Now, patient perspective becomes even more augmented as products become more complex because the patient interface is of a higher risk, right? Now, well-defined and developed strategy can facilitate that market access for more complex generic alternatives, driving the high cost of complex products down and improve patient access. As products become more complex, as I mentioned, the patient interface, impact, and input becomes crucial between generics as well as brand drugs, further expanding that patient engagement to even include special populations and understanding their specific needs when it comes to generic drug development. Now, patient safety reporting is within the heart of OGD's mission. And when patients report safety concerns with products in the post-market stage, it triggers OGD to investigate and determine if there are any safety concerns. Now, I've shown you here a number of examples where patient reporting did trigger an investigation. This becomes even more important for high-risk drugs. And when patients provide information on product performance, particularly in combination products, we can prevent and mitigate continued adverse events in the post-marketing stage. So there are a number of examples where real live information, where patient engagement could have mitigated that issue, and some of which could be combination products, but other could be as simple as changing the container system. So what does patient listening do? Well, patient listening sessions that we're advocating for help FDA understand what is important to patients, caregivers, and advocates when medical products are being developed. And when we host or request those sessions, or when patients request those sessions, they inform regulatory decision-making and at least provide a starting point for early stage research and development. They also help us educate the FDA review staff about health-related experiences and perspectives, needs that are most important to patients, caregivers, advocates, and community representatives. They help patients and advocates understand FDA's mission as well as the work we do, and establish methods to identify what is important to patients in the generic context, collecting robust and representative input that would be meaningful in the context of therapeutic equivalence. It also helps us tailor our methods for patient education and outreach programs to provide patients with the knowledge needed to make better informed decisions. So to just close this session with a couple of highlights is that we do want to explain and highlight that patients and patient advocacy groups really should recognize that their contributions for over a decade now have been tangible and impactful on their recommendations that they provide both for us as regulators as well as developers. We need to really acknowledge that patient input, it completes the dialogue that exists between industry and the agency, not only from a regulatory standpoint, but also from a scientific one. We do want and encourage patient advocacy groups to utilize the extensive resources that I've shared in the initial slides that are also diversified enough that you can provide us your voice. Now, you share your knowledge and expertise with FDA allows your voice to be heard regarding any pending regulatory policies. So I'll close this session with saying that patient input is real world evidence. Those patient reported outcomes, preferences, experiences is data that allows us to identify information and possible knowledge gaps. Without our major stakeholder engagement, we are missing the prospect of stakeholder alignment to achieve collaboratively what we cannot individually. And with that, I thank you, and we'll go ahead and open the floor for questions.
Kaushik, can you take up the Q&A, please?
Yes, Mathew, thank you. This is Kaushik Desai here. Thank you, Sarah, for an excellent overview of a patient engagement opportunities taken up by OGD for the developer of generic drugs. We have a few questions, which I'll be take up one by one. First question is, how to make up patients to ensure about quality of generic medicine, because patient having a mindset about best results and quality regarding branded medicines over generic since so many years.
It's a great question. So let's take a step back and recognize that in order for a patient to trust a medication and adhere to that medication, they need to understand how it works, what regulations protect patients, and how efficacy was portrayed. What OGD is doing is continuously communicating through healthcare providers as well as patient advocacy groups to reiterate and highlight that the brand drug and the generic drug are the same. They are therapeutically and pharmaceutically equivalent. OGD ensures high quality, affordable medications are available to the public. And it is important for us to continue communicating to patients how we ensure that generic drugs are as safe and are equivalent to brand name drugs. So we're continuing those efforts. And that's why in the presentation I mentioned the two-way communication is we want to know where patients are getting their information from, because when we know that channel, we can tailor our method of communication in order to make sure patients have the proper knowledge in place to make that informed decision. So what we want to do is to tell patients what OGD does and the efforts that it puts into the regulatory process to ensure that when you're taking a generic drug, it is exactly the same as you taking the brand name drug. I also like to mention that the review team that reviews a brand drug and the generic drug are one and the same. So we do ensure that whether it's a brand or a generic, the regulations are the same and the enforcement as well is the same.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. There's another question now. Low-cost generic drugs does have an impact on bioequivalence and bioavailability with the original molecule and risk the efficacy and may affect the therapy outcomes. Your comments, please.
So I'm going to reiterate the question just to make sure that I heard it right. Are you saying that the cost of a generic drug results in lower bioequivalence? Is that what the question is mentioning?
I think indirectly it means that.
So I can assure you that the reason why a generic drug costs less than a brand name drug is that it did not require the extensive research to prove efficacy and safety that the brand name drug had to go through. The generic drug will only need to provide evidence that this particular product they're developing is bioequivalent to the brand name drug. And the word bioequivalent can span anywhere from just in vitro data all the way to running a bioequivalence clinical study, depending on the drug product. The one thing that I can assure you right now is that a generic drug product to be approved must be bioequivalent based on rigorous regulations that OGD highlights and enforces. Our Office of Bioequivalence within the Office of Generic Drugs is tasked with verifying and identifying supportive data that the generic drug product is bioequivalent to the brand name product. So cost does not correlate to efficacy. Cost does not correlate to quality because medical products, quality and efficacy cannot be compromised. And I know that there's a mindset that as with any product, cost is related, but we do not compromise when it comes to medical products. They are one and the same.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. There is one basic question someone has asked, how the patient will find out whether drug is generic or a patent?
Whether the drug is generic or a brand?
Yes.
So that's a very good question. And I do encourage you to access the Orange Book website on the FDA, where you can determine if the product that you're using is a brand or a generic product. So they are listed and updated periodically.
Okay, thank you. The last question, how should one incorporate patient experience in a field such as dermatology, where patient population and experience can be too big to cover?
Can you repeat the question?
I'll just repeat. How one should incorporate patient experience in a field such as dermatology, where the population and experience can be too vast to cover?
That's a very good question. And this is more in the drawing board of the development process because it is a risk-based assessment. It is trying to identify what are those critical patient attributes to your particular product. And I think you really mentioned a complex product, right? Like dermatological products in many cases are a little complex with a diverse patient population. That's the time to ask, what are the critical aspects? What is it about your product that could impact, even just by appearance, how a patient could perceive that product? Is there certain steps that you can take to mitigate issues where a patient cannot accurately use your medication or your product that you're developing. Developing that correct method and questionnaire in order to continue engaging with patients is a critical aspect. So just like we, in the quality space, we say critical quality attributes, and we determine whether it's a low risk, medium risk, and high risk to narrow down the questions. I would probably say ask the critical patient attributes as well when it comes to perception, usability, risk, benefit, as well as challenges to substitutability. And while you're in that process, continue to safeguard, to ask prospectively and proactively what unexpected safety issues could arise in the process.
Okay. Thank you, Sarah, for an excellent, making more interactive this question answer. I am through with the questions. I could not see any more questions either in the question and box or a chat box. So once again, thank you very much. And Mathew, I am done with the question and answer. Over to you to conclude the session, please. Mathew?
Yes, I want to echo the same sentiments that Kaushik expressed. Sarah, this has been pretty interesting. And we thank you for your time and effort. And as I said at the beginning, this is recorded. It will be available on our website for 1 full year for those who want to go back and listen to it. So thanks, everyone. Thank you, Mila. And thank you, Sarah.